We're going to spend just a couple minutes doing some more digital graffiti before we get started. And I'll tell you why, early in the presentation, why we're waiting until after the top of the hour. Oh, Ingrid, I love your sunshine, that big white sunshine. That's great. And I love these colors too. There's really neat things you can do with the Zoom whiteboard that allow us to interact with other people. Hi, Shannon. Thanks for the graffiti. This is great. Andrew's on there, Colette's on there, Steven's on there. Oh, and Barbie found the arrows. Those arrows that add your name on, I think they're only available on tablets and mobile devices. Mike, the boldness, Mike. I love it. This is great. Thank you, Tan. Thank you, Ashley. This is wonderful. Great. So what we're doing right now is we're being interactive. This is a lot different than a lot of Zoom meetings where it starts with a host who just talks at everybody. I've invited you in to do something here. And I want you to just note how that changes your experience in a Zoom meeting. Rather than starting with an agenda or with is everybody here or what city are you from, having something creative and artistic to do, how does that make you feel as we're about to get started? And just take note of that, because this is one of the principles that we're going to go over. So go ahead and finish up your drawings, because we're going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. And for a lot of this presentation, it is going to be that one to everybody else. I've got a lot of information to share with you, and so I'm gonna go through it as quickly and concisely as I can. I am gonna stay after the top of the hour. If anybody wants to stay after for Q&A, if you've got specific questions about Zoom or about your own presentations, I'm happy to talk with you about them. So now I'm gonna shut down the Blackboard and share my screen so that we can get into the presentation. So thank you everybody for coming. This is Be a Better Zoom host for Tech Week 2020. This is my third time at Tech Week. When I first came to New Zealand 3 years ago, I landed at Tech Week because I said, I want to know what technology is happening in New Zealand, because I was looking to come here with my family, and is this place going to be a good match for us? And when I came to Tech Week and I met all of the nerds in the country, I thought, wow, these are my people. And so every year since, I've given presentations at Tech Week. And this week, actually today, I'm going to the post shop and I'm sending my application for permanent residency. So first off, thank you everyone in New Zealand. You have a wonderful country and I'm really happy to be here. But what I want to talk with you about today is how to interact with people, not just in New Zealand, but all around the world through hosting better Zoom meetings. And this is the agenda of what we're going to talk about today. We'll discuss the difference between meetings and webinars. I'll share with you some best practices for virtual facilitation. We'll talk about setting expectations with agendas, the difference between leading and administrating a meeting, how to check in and practice active listening, and other exercises that help keep people engaged. According to, I'm also going to give you this Zoom host checklist. I'll pop it a link in the chat. You should have gotten it yesterday with the slides and the reminder of the presentation, but I'll also make sure that everybody gets this later. This has the checklist I use before starting all my Zoom meetings, as well as a bunch of scripts that you can use to orient your group to using the basic features of Zoom. According to a study by the Harvard Business Review, 90% of people admit to daydreaming in meetings, and 73% of people admit to doing other work, which means statistically, almost 3/4 of you are doing something else right now. Anybody brave enough to show a hand? Anybody check an email? Anybody on Twitter? No? Well, if you do happen to do that, I don't blame you. Because let's face it, my competition for your attention right now is the entire internet. And that's really tough to compete against the entire internet for your attention. So what some people do when they start a Zoom meeting is they request that everybody shuts down other programs, goes full screen, and does all that. And I don't do that because my belief is if I can be entertaining enough that you can't help but pay attention, then I'm doing my job right as a Zoom host. But if I'm boring, if I'm wasting your time, if your time would be better spent going through your email inbox, that's my fault as the host. And so I want you to think about that as you're leading your own Zoom meetings. How can you demand attention in a way that you're so good, they can't ignore you? That's the goal. That's what we want to be as Zoom hosts, is so good that your participants can't ignore you. So let's talk about the difference between a meeting and a webinar. What's the difference? What's the difference between a meeting and a webinar? Which one are we in right now? Let's go ahead and take a quick poll. Is this a meeting or is this a webinar? And while we're at it, tell me, is this your first time participating in a poll in Zoom? Okay, I'll give it about 5 more seconds. Great. Okay, all right, now I'm going to end the poll and share the results. 15% of people thought this was a meeting, and 85% of people thought this was a webinar. It's a new poll. The poll is a new thing for about half of us. That's exciting. Now, next time anybody asks, have you ever done a poll before? Everybody here can say yes. So that's great. This is a meeting and not a webinar, according to Zoom. In our common parlance, any type of virtual meeting we can call a webinar when we're talking to other people, we're posting on Twitter, we're sending out a notification in a newsletter. We can call it a webinar and people know this is what we mean. But when you're scheduling something in Zoom, Zoom's very particular that a meeting is something where you can do a gallery view. Everybody can have their cameras on. Everybody can participate. With a webinar, only the host can have their camera on. Everybody else can raise their hand or can do Q&A. Q&A is a special function of the webinar in Zoom, but you can't do Q&A in meetings. So meetings are more for discussion, for the group, for everyone to participate. And webinars are when one person is talking. Functionally, for the first hour of this meeting, it's gonna be treated like a webinar. But I scheduled it as a meeting so that I can see a grid of everybody's faces. And it helps me see, are people really paying attention? Am I being engaging enough? Because in a webinar, you don't know. You can't see anyone. You can't see that glare of white that comes up when they open a browser tab. You know, you get a pulse of your meeting when you can see everybody's faces, but you lose that pulse when you're just doing a webinar. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about what meetings are really about, whether it's a meeting or a webinar. This virtual facilitation, it comes from the Latin root of facile, which means to make easy. This is really what we're doing, is we're making something easy. If somebody shows up to a virtual meeting and you're making things more complicated for them, they're not going to want to pay attention. They're not going to want to attend. But if you can make their life or their work easier, they'll show up and they'll pay attention. And that's my goal today, is I want to make your Zoom meetings easier in the future. And the way that we do it is looking at the overlap of these 3 areas. Pardon me, I've got a quick little bug to fix. There we go. All right. So virtual facilitation is an overlap of the tech, the agenda, and the conversation. The place where these circles overlap is your delivery, your engagement, and your progress. In the center of all three of these, this is your purpose. When you know the purpose of the meeting, decisions become a lot easier. Does this serve the purpose or does it not serve the purpose? Will this help my attendees or will it not help my attendees participate in this purpose? The purpose is the why. It's why we do a meeting. And when you know your purpose, you can have a great meeting. This is one of the communities I belong to. Everybody in this screenshot here is in a different time zone, and a lot of us are in different continents all around the world. And when we came together for a shared purpose, when the host managed the tech, the conversation, and the agenda, we were able to have strong connections. We were able to nurture our group purpose. When you're leading a meeting, though, you're going to run into 4 problems. The first problem is learning new tech is a headache. It's not just a headache for you, it's a headache for your attendees. If you want to have people go into breakout rooms or participate in the chat or do a poll, asking them to learn a new interface is challenging. And training people in the beginning of a meeting, it can eat up a lot of time. The second problem that I see a lot is that people are disconnected. The things that worked when we were in one location and we were all in the same room, those techniques don't work anymore because we're all in different rooms, in different buildings, in different continents, in different time zones. So we've lost some of that shared connection that we had when we were sharing space. The third problem I see a lot is that participants get distracted. I might be somewhat entertaining, but you might have a favorite website that's just a browser tab away. You might be waiting for an important notification that comes and pops in on your screen, and I have to compete with that distraction for your attention. But the biggest problem I see with Zoom hosts is that they're worried that they're being ignored. That they put all this time and effort into creating a presentation or leading a conversation, and when the meeting starts, nobody's paying attention. So out of these 4 problems, I'd like you to type in the chat box a number of which one you deal with the most. Are you frustrated by learning new tech? By the disconnection between people? Is the distraction challenging for you, or is it a fear of being ignored? Which one is the most challenging for you? Sarah says 1, 10 says 2. Seeing a lot of 3s in here. Lots of 1s. Lee says none. Well done, Lee. Not a problem for you. Dr. Braun says all 4. Yeah, these can be challenging. But overcoming these is not impossible. It just takes a few tricks. And that's what I'm going to share with you today, of how to be a better Zoom host. The way we do it is we focus on each of these items, the agenda, the tech, and the conversation. And we're going to start by looking at the agenda. An agenda is like a scaffold. When you're going to build a building, you build a scaffolding around it that's not going to be there in the future. But the scaffolding provides expectations for what you're going to build inside. And that's what your agenda does for your meetings, is it creates clear expectations. According to Cornell University, less than 37% of meetings have agendas. And this is really strange considering that the average cost of a meeting in salary is $338. Now, if I'm going to pay a few $100s to get people together, I want to make sure that we know what we're doing there, that we have that scaffolding of clear expectations so we know what we're building in the meeting. Some easy best practices you can follow is anytime you send an invitation to a meeting, write a quick agenda. 3 bullet points. We're going to talk about this and this and this. And I like to write this in the calendar invitation so that there's not documents or emails to keep track of. Somebody looks at the calendar, double clicks on it, and there's the agenda. That allows them to prepare questions, to think about what they're going to talk about in advance. After your meeting, sending your notes and your recording should be an automatic process, so that if somebody misses the meeting and there's somebody who's been delegated to take notes and send it out with the recording, then it keeps everybody on the same page, even if they weren't able to attend live. When you create an environment of high familiarity and high pressure, that's where learning can happen. That's where you can make real progress with a team or with a group. If you provide a high pressure environment with low familiarity, because there's no expectations, there's no agenda for the meeting, it can cause a lot of anxiety. People don't know what to say or what's expected of them. If you create an environment with low familiarity and low pressure, people don't care. What am I doing here? I don't really know what this is about. I don't know how I'm supposed to contribute. In arenas of high familiarity and low pressure, it can be comfortable, but you don't really make progress. You don't actually get things done. So strive to make an environment of high familiarity and high pressure, because that's the forge where you're going to get the best work done. So now let's talk about the tech. I could dive deep into the tech, and I can train you on all sorts of different ins and outs of using the Zoom platform. And I have a program that does that, and I'll tell you about it a little later. But for right now, I want to give you some basic tips. When you're leading a meeting, you need to make an intentional choice if you're going to also administrate the meeting. I like administrating my own meetings because I can administrate it at the same time that I'm leading it. But it means that I have to do a bunch of different things at once. If you're not confident with the tech, assign someone else to be your administrator. They can admit people from the waiting room. They can monitor the chat. They can help with tech support. You can delegate to them during the meeting. But if you do this, if you have an admin host, I recommend that you keep a back channel communication open so that you can text them offline. And you don't have to interact with the Zoom interface, but you can chat with them through Skype. You can send a message through your mobile phone. Have some back channel so that if you need some backstage assistance, then it doesn't interfere with the meeting on the front of the stage. They can be your stage manager. A stage manager is a theatrical position. It's somebody who knows every line and every cue and every set transition that happens in an entire play. But you're not supposed to see them. They dress all in black. They hang out backstage. And their job is to take care of all the details so that the performer can create a connection with the audience. If the performer on stage is distracted by making sure that Mrs. Huxley gets into her seat in the back row, or figuring out why the house lights have come on in the middle of the performance, if the performer's doing those things, they can't connect meaningfully with the audience. So that's why the stage manager is there to handle all of the details. And an admin host can be your stage manager for your Zoom meeting. So let's talk about microphones. Microphones have a really they've got some neat tricks in Zoom, and I'd like to share one with you. Sometimes when you're in a meeting, somebody's got background noise, and all of a sudden everybody's hearing, and it's totally annoying, And when that happens, you can use a hotkey as the host. And I'd like everybody to write this down. If you're on a Mac, write down Command-Control-M. And if you're on a PC, write down Alt-M. When you do this in a meeting, it mutes everyone else so that it's just you. And knowing this hotkey enables you, when you start hearing that background noise, you can just hit this hotkey and boom, problem's taken care of. Now, when microphones are muted, there's this neat trick you can do where you hold the space bar to unmute yourself. It works like a walkie-talkie. Everybody press your space bar. You see how your mute icon changes? Yeah. Great. Okay, now everybody go on mute, and I'm going to ask everyone a question. I want everyone to hit the space bar and answer the question verbally at the same time. You ready? Okay. If you put a roast in a roaster, what do you put in a toaster?
Bread.
Toast.
Bread.
It's bread. You don't put toast in a toaster. You put bread in a toaster.
Ah, man, that is so smart. Ah, that's a great joke.
Thank you. So now I'm going to use this hotkey here, and I'm going to hit Command Control M to mute everybody. Well done. That was great. Okay, so now let's talk about the conversation. Because the conversation that happens, this is where a lot of the progress happens in Zoom meetings. I know I'm talking a lot during this meeting because it's how I've structured it. It's mostly speaking instead of facilitating. But what they found scientifically is that people don't change their minds when they're listening. People change their minds when they're talking. When they have to defend a point of view, when they have to articulate why they really think a certain way. And so if you're looking to create change in a group of people, talking to them isn't the way to do it. Listening to them, facilitating their conversation, that's the way to actually create change across a Zoom meeting. If you start with engagement, it's a lot easier to keep people engaged. There's a momentum that happens. If I asked you now for the first time to interact with me and you've been sitting there for a half hour without doing anything in this meeting, it would be really hard to pull your attention and your shyness into an interaction. But if you start with engagement, if you ask people, hey, can you see my slides? Can I see a thumbs up? Hey, where in the world are you? Right in the chat box. This is why so many meetings start with engagement, is because it's a lot easier to keep people engaged than it is to start later. One of the best ways to do this is with an unofficial start. And for those of you who arrived early or right on time, you saw that unofficial start. I like to run my unofficial start, my icebreaker exercise, from 10 minutes before the meeting to 3 to 4 minutes after it's supposed to start. And what this does is it allows early arrivals to interact with you without everybody sitting around and twiddling their thumbs and waiting. And it also allows people to enter late. So that if somebody has a tech issue and they have to reboot Zoom, they have to reboot their computer, they're not missing any critical content. What Priya Parker says in The Art of Gathering, she says that your opening should be a kind of pleasant shock therapy. That it should grab them and honor them and make them feel totally welcomed and deeply grateful to be there. If your icebreaker exercise can do this, then you can create an environment where lots of great things can happen. Crafting that environment requires you to be the thermostat and not the thermometer. A thermometer can gauge the temperature of a room, but a thermostat sets the temperature. When you can set the temperature, then your energy leads the group energy. If I'm bored and I'm not engaging, the likelihood of you being bored and not engaged is really, really high. But if I can bring my best self to the meeting, if I can be enthusiastic and interactive, then the meeting raises up. And when you, as a participant in the meeting, you raise yourself to that level. This is the responsibility of the host, is to lead the energy of the meeting. And when you raise your own energy, you help raise people through this participant engagement ladder. The bare minimum that you can expect is that somebody's just listening to what you say. They're passive. They're not really doing a whole lot, but they are present. We hope that they get reactive. That when we say, hey, can you see my slides? Can I get a thumbs up? That they give you a thumbs up, that they write in the chat box, that they participate in the conversation. because otherwise they're going to get distracted. They're going to start ignoring you. The way that you move people up this ladder is asking for responses. Every time you ask for a response, they're going to either react or be passive. Because those are the two options. They can either react or be passive when you ask for a response. Now, there's a better and a worse to this ladder. People can either be contributing to your meeting. They could be proactive in moving the meeting forward, or they could be actively destructive. They could be in the private chat, sabotaging you. The more that you can ask people to respond and to contribute, the easier it is for people to move up this ladder. Now, where would you say you are right now? And be honest, I'm an American, I've got thick skin. Tell me where you are on this ladder. Write it in the chat box. Are you reactive? Are you passive? Are you distracted? Jenny feels distracted because she feels ignored. Yeah, a lot of people are passive. Couple of reactives. Passive. Passive is a common feeling in an audience when they don't get to contribute. When your audience is on mute, it's harder to get them up this ladder. But if you facilitate conversation, if you launch a breakout room so that people can share what they think about it, that's a safe space for them to respond, for them to move up. Good point, David. People may say passive, but here they are responding. So even if they don't feel that way, I know they've moved up the ladder because they've chatted. But I'm sure there's people who are here in attendance that aren't answering this, that are distracted, that are ignoring me, because I'm competing against the internet. I totally expect that there's some percentage of people who are distracted by the internet. But the more that I can keep your attention here by asking you to contribute, by inviting you to respond, the more that you're going to participate. So some of the common opening exercises that people use is, hey, can you answer this question for me in chat? Can I see your thumbs? Talking about the mute protocol. This is an easy one to start with because it lets people know technically how they can participate and what you expect from them in terms of how often they're talking. If you're going to be recording, sometimes it's good to let people know that they'll be recorded and they can turn their cameras off if they choose. And I also have in the Zoom host checklist that I'll share with you in a little bit, I have this orientation script that you can use to describe to people how to toggle between gallery view and speaker view, how to pin a video. You know, this type of training early in the meeting can help people learn how to technically engage. And then of course there's the agenda. That's the easiest way to start a meeting, is with the agenda. But when your meeting continues, insist on engagement. Check in. Does this make sense? Am I making sense with you? Can I see some thumbs if this makes sense? Everybody give me a thumbs up if you know what I'm saying. Yeah? That's a check-in. I know that I'm making sense, but I want to hear it from you. When you ask people to share, that keeps them engaged. And then there's this process that I really like called active listening. And Oscar Trimboli talks about the 5 levels of listening. Yeah, I know, Jenny. I'm not able to answer a whole lot of the questions, but I'm going to come back to the chat at the end. So if you'd like to stick around for Q&A at the top of the hour, you can either ask me questions verbally, or I'll have time to go back through that chat then. You're right, Ingrid. I need an admin. So the 5 levels of listening is you can either listen to yourself, which is really basic. You're just listening to what you say. But listening to other people only starts with the content of what they say. Behind what they say, there's also the context in which they're saying it. And behind that, there's what's unsaid. And then there's the meaning. And with active listening, you can listen for these 5 levels. And you can use good questions to do this. So if I understand you, and then you reflect back what you've heard. What do you mean by that? Asking people to extrapolate. But my favorite question is when somebody says something and I know it's the tip of the iceberg, I just invite them. Say more about that. You mentioned that, that this was really important. Say more about that. Why is that important to you? These sorts of questions can help you dig deeper into why people are saying their content within their context. It can help you hear what's unsaid and the meaning behind what they're saying. So I've got a lot of these in the Zoom host checklist, a lot of best practices on how to facilitate good meetings. And I'll put a link to the chat in the chat for that shortly. I'm also going to put a link to another workshop that I'm teaching at Tech Week on Friday, and it's on accessibility in webinars and how to make your meetings accessible for people with disabilities. I was working with a disability advocacy group a couple months ago, migrating their face-to-face workshops to virtual workshops. And they said, we want our virtual meetings to be as accessible as possible. And I said, okay, I'm going to go find the manual for that. And I went out looking and I couldn't find one. There's a lot of information on how to make websites accessible and plenty of information on how to make in-person meetings accessible. But there's not a lot in the overlap. So I made one. And the webinar accessibility checklist is available to anybody who comes to see me on Friday for accessibility in webinars. It's $15 and it's at 9 a.m. on Friday. And I'm also teaching another workshop on Saturday for 90 minutes on advanced virtual facilitation. And this workshop is going to be it's the first session of, oh, I'm sorry, my slides are a little out of order. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you these links right here. So pardon me 1 minute while I just load these into chat. There's for the workshop on Friday, and Zoom does this funny thing where it likes to mess with you. Yeah, I definitely need an admin because I could just say, hey, could you drop those links in right now? Do you see how much smoother this would go with a separate admin? Oh my gosh. And here is the Zoom host checklist as well. Okay, the final link that I want to give you is for these slides. You should have gotten these earlier because it's a good accessibility best practice to share slides before a meeting. Turns out it really helps people with visual impairment because they can't see my slides when I'm sharing my screen. But if you send slides in advance, they can use a screen reader to read the slides and they get that scaffolding of expectations before they come in. So we're going to do Q&A in just a minute, but first I want to tell you about the Zoom Host Intensive. And my Saturday workshop, Advanced Facilitation Training, is the first of these 4 different sessions. And these workshops go through the different kinds of exercises you can use to facilitate good Zoom meetings, different questions you can use to facilitate conversations, the tech involved in leading a good meeting. And I learned all of these things. Yes, Will, to answer your question, you do get the slides afterwards. I'll send it with the replay. When quarantine hit, some people found out that I know how to take face-to-face workshops and turn them into virtual webinars. And so I got swamped with work. And I started helping a lot of organizations make that transition. And TEPO, an organization here in New Zealand, they have a lot of face-to-face facilitators that suddenly needed to be upskilled in how to use Zoom. And they could use Zoom basically. They could get on a meeting and have conversation. The basics of video conferencing are pretty easy. But as you've seen in today's presentation, there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes. And it turned out a lot of my work wasn't technical. It was training the trainers on how to lead good meetings. The theatrical aspect ended up being where they got the most value, because you can watch YouTube videos to learn about how to do the technical proficiency of Zoom. But how to lead a good meeting, how to hold space, how to moderate conversations, those are all things that we go through in the Zoom Host Intensive. I talk about how to optimize your connection speed so that you have the clearest possible resolution for your guests. I go through the ins and outs of how to share a screen so that you could share videos, you could share whiteboards, you could share on external devices. We practice breakout rooms so that we go into breakout rooms and then come back. And that's something I'd actually like to do today, is to do a brief breakout room exercise. And I also train you on how to use polls, all the ins and outs on how to create, launch, and manage your polls. This program is great for teachers that are leading a class of students, for coaches facilitating virtual groups, for speakers that can't get in front of an audience and have to present remotely. But it's really for managers who are leading distributed teams. If you have a team distributed across a geography and you need to keep everyone engaged and moving forward to the same purpose, that's what the Zoom Host Intensive can help you do. And the work that I've done has helped people make that transition from face-to-face to virtual so that they could still create those engaged and supportive environments where progress happens. Because Zoom fatigue is a real thing. People will show up at meeting after meeting and then just be brain dead. But if you know how to lead a good meeting and you know where to structure the breaks and how to invite people to change their state from one to another, then you can keep everyone's energy up. That's really your responsibility as the leader of the meeting. It's not just to come in with great energy, but to tend the energy of your attendees. So this is 4 90-minute training sessions, and it also comes with a badge, the Virtual Facilitator Certification. It's recognized for a continuing education credit in the US. I'm not qualified with NZQA yet, but I'm working on it. But the digital badge that you get after completing this program is recognized by LinkedIn and the Open Badges Protocol. And it shows to people that you've invested the time and the energy into learning how to be a better Zoom host. So if you want to take the first session of the Zoom Host Intensive, then you can meet me on Saturday at 10:30, and we're going to go through the first 90-minute workshop then. So that brings us to the conclusion of the presentation, and now I'd like to do some exercises. Because I've done a lot of talking at you. Does anybody feel brain dead? Does anybody feel like, whoa, that was a lot of information?
No.
No? Well, I'm seeing some thumbs. Yeah? Good. Well, I'd like to do a breakout room exercise. What I'd like to do is to disperse us into breakout rooms of three to four people. And I'd like you to find out how many things you all have in common in 3 minutes. How many things does everyone have in common? Okay? I'm going to give you 3 minutes. You should see an invitation to join a breakout room, and I'll see you back here in a few. All right. So if you're still watching the replay, the recording, this is an interesting thing about recording and breakout rooms. The breakout rooms are not recorded because the recording follows the host. If I stay here, it'll keep recording here. Sometimes I put on a dance party and I just play music and dance. Turns out YouTube knocks me for a copyright penalty. So I'm not going to dance today, but instead I'm giving you some extra tutorial. If I go into a breakout room, in some versions of Zoom, the recording will follow me and it only records the people in the room. But if people go into breakout rooms to talk and have intimate conversations, the recording doesn't follow them. Okay, so now I'm going to tell them 1 more minute. And I'm going to close. Oh, they're staying until the end. Means they're getting good scores. Ah. All right, well done.
That was fun.
So how did that go? Anybody want to share how many you got?
One,
We
two,
got 2.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
2, 5,
7.
7,
8.
8,
210.
10. You got 10. Wow.
210.
210. Whoa. Oh, because of bones? Clever. That's how you hack the rules. No, Ingrid, I didn't put the Ingrids together intentionally. That was a total, that was random. Great, so it looks like 210 is the winner. Congratulations. So how do you feel in this meeting after that exercise?
More connected.
More connected? What else?
And energized, more connected to each other.
Uh-huh. Why is that?
Engagement.
Because we get to know each other. We find a commonality between human beings, despite the distance and the technology, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. When you find common ground, it helps you adhere to each other as a group. Until that exercise, this was a webinar. And now we're in a meeting. And I structured this way so that you could experientially understand what the difference is between webinar presentation and meeting presentation. So if you're not in gallery view right now, what I'd like you to do is in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom window, there's a button that says either speaker view or gallery view, and toggle between those two so that we can come to gallery. Now that we're in a meeting and we've had an enjoyable conversation and we've all gotten to participate, I'd like to facilitate a discussion. And during this discussion, anybody can jump in at any time. I'd like to know, what's the biggest challenge with leading a meeting in Zoom for you?
Yeah, not overstep on other people's thinking. I tend to be controlling.
Mm-hmm.
I need to take a step back, and yeah, it's developing people, allowing people to express their own creativity.
Allowing people to express their own creativity. Yeah. What's a way that you could use Zoom to do that?
You could have a theme for your Zoom meeting if it's a regular meeting that you have with the same people, you know, whether it's the time of year or an occasion like wearing silly hats or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You could change your name.
Yep. You can change your name. You can do an exercise where everybody changes their name. I like Colette's idea of a theme because that provides that scaffolding of expectations. Shannon brought up other people's technological challenges. Yeah. Hardware is difficult to overcome because if your participants have a hardware issue, there's not a lot you can do in the meeting to overcome that.
I find it taxing planning for meetings. So just having to, facilitating probably 10 a week and just all the pre-planning to think about how you get the best out of that time. Or like I don't have a playbook of exercises or, like it would be useful to have, that sort of list.
Have you ever heard of Session Lab?
No.
They have a playbook and I'm going to drop their link here in chat. Session Lab is great. It's used by a lot of facilitators to craft their meeting, and it does these neat technical things where you list out your exercises and you can drag and drop them and then hit a button to add and subtract minutes, and it calculates the total for you. Really, really useful tool. But you mentioned, Ingrid, that it's exhausting to plan. Do you find that you spend more time planning the meeting than actually in the meeting itself?
No, I'm just so busy that it's you don't have time to. Like, I just feel like I'm ramming into meeting after meeting after meeting, which is so Zoom fatigue, because it's gone crazy and everyone books now virtual meetings. Because particularly my big team is based in Melbourne, and so they're all in lockdown and ISO. And so the moment ISO happened, everyone's just kind of gone crazy. But so having there's probably about 3 or 4 that I run that are big ones every week, which is around us evolving and changing our business. And so thinking how to get the best out of them, and because I manage a team of 22 leaders, like giving that, so sometimes it's the questions that engage them, and I just find it it's just there's not enough hours in the day. But no, I don't spend more time planning than in the meeting. Mm-hmm. But I wish I had more of that playbook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, hopefully the session lab exercises will help. They've got a library of exercises that you can use. And I've listed out about 36 of my favorites in the Zoom host checklist. There's not a lot of instruction in there. It's more just, a brief description of the exercise. But Session Lab has detailed instructions on how to facilitate those exercises.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. So I got some really great feedback in the chat box about when people joined that they thought that it had already started and that they showed up late. Did anybody else feel that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yes.
That's great feedback, because I use that exercise sometimes with regular teams, with people who meet the same time every week, and it's assumed because they're regular meeting that this is part of whatever it is we're meeting for. But when you get a new group together, there's this interesting thing that I'm noticing where the cohesion in the group, if it's there or not, it gives you more or less opportunities for what you can do with exercises. Before that cohesion happens, you're limited in what you can really bring to the meeting. For instance, today, we achieved some cohesion in that breakout room where suddenly we were a group. And before that, we were a bunch of individuals who happened to be at the same place. So when thinking about your own meetings and your own teams, do you primarily have a cohesive group that's met regularly, or do you primarily meet with new people and new groups all the time?
Blend of both.
Blend of both? Yeah. Couple people say new, couple people say cohesive, likely new. Blended. Yeah. Yeah. So how do we treat those differently? How do you treat a cohesive group differently than a new group? Any ideas? This morning's whiteboard exercise aside, what would work better with a cohesive group that wouldn't work with a new group? Jokes.
With a new group, there's much more need to explain the basics, I think, of how the meeting's going to work and how the tech works and things like that. With a cohesive group, you can assume.
Great point. Yeah, because if you do a Zoom training with a group and then you meet again and again and again, everybody already has that shared understanding. But with a new group, you kind of have to assume that everybody's new. Ingrid says jokes. Yeah, sometimes jokes work really well and sometimes they don't.
With a new group, there's a greater need for an icebreaker. With a cohesive group, it's just really a reconnection.
Great point. Yeah, icebreakers are much more important with new groups. Yeah. So we have a few minutes left before the top of the hour. Does anybody have any questions about Zoom or about virtual facilitation? I'd like to just open the floor.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I think I'm speaking on behalf of some others as well. How do you work the whiteboard and contribute to the whiteboard?
Aha. So the whiteboard is, you do it by sharing your screen. And when you share your screen, you get a grid of options. Do you want to share your desktop? Do you want to share a device? Do you want to share this window? All these different options. And whiteboard is most times it's the second option. And so you just click share screen and go to whiteboard. And then you have to find the annotation toolbar. That's the hard part about it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and click whiteboard. And here we've got all this lovely art that people did before. So I'm going to make a new whiteboard so that it's fresh. We can still go back to that one. You can actually toggle between whiteboards, which is fun. But the trick to using a whiteboard is you have to train people how to use the annotation toolbar. And it's tough to find. So that's why I put some instructions in the upper right. Some people like using the Zoom whiteboard because it's here and it's in the Zoom interface. And other people like using an external whiteboard. Some of the ones I use include a Jamboard, which is by Google. And so anybody with a Google account can use it. Mural is another good one because Mural will allow you to just click a link without signing up to create an account. And Grant, you're right. If you're using the browser version of Zoom, you can't use the whiteboard. You have to be using the app, whether the app is on the phone or the tablet or on the desktop. But the browser version doesn't have an annotation toolbar. Ingrid asked.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
With the whiteboard activity that you had set up, so did you go in earlier and write that all up, your instructions and stuff, and have it set up ready? Or in the world map activity that you said with the world map with the stamps, did you copy and paste a picture of the world map onto the whiteboard?
Great question. For the first question, I used the text tool to write out, I actually copied and pasted the text because I've used that exercise so many times now, I could just paste it in.
Yeah.
But I had to manually draw the whole thing. The Zoom whiteboard doesn't let you put an image down. So you can't just drop in an image of the world map. The interesting thing about that exercise is the only way to do it is to share your screen. And the easiest way is to share a slide with a world map. Something most people don't know is that if I share my screen and it's a desktop and I share this and I go full screen, does anybody remember how to get to your annotation toolbar? Can you stamp on this slide? Anytime someone is sharing their screen, you can do digital graffiti on their slides.
Is that anytime, or did you enable that?
Anytime.
Oh, that's dangerous information.
I know. To my knowledge, you can't disable this feature.
Oh gosh.
I'm cautious about letting people know this at the beginning. I usually wait until the end to let them know, because otherwise you can have people just, tagging your slides all the way through.
But if you go to the next slide, does the annotation stay unmoving? Or
they sure do. So I'll come back to a previous slide and I'll go full screen and it just goes through. Now,
but you have the power. Do you have the power to just to clear that all in one go?
I do. I can clear all drawings.
Cool.
But I have to manually do it each time, because if people put more drawings on right now, then I'd have to have, this is where an admin host would come in really useful. Go and clean up the graffiti.
How do you clear it all?
Really cool.
In the annotation toolbar, because I'm the host, I have an option for clear at the end. You might have this option too, where you can clear your drawings.
Oh my God. And I just realized that actually I could print screen your slide. So I've been, because I'm so many webinars, so many stuff, I do the print screen and I put it on a PowerPoint so I can annotate the PowerPoint on my iPad.
Nice.
So knowing that I can save each slide when it actually comes out, that's fantastic.
Yeah, you sure can.
Can you tell who is annotating?
Only when they use the arrow that has their name on it, and I think that's only on tablet and mobile that you can use that arrow. That's the only time I can tell who did it. So if somebody, you know, writes a nasty word by hand, I can't really tell who did it. So you're right, Kirsty, that is a dangerous thing for your audience to know.
Hi, can you briefly describe how you do breakout rooms and how the assignment works?
Sure, Jeff. There's actually a really good video that Zoom uses to demonstrate breakout rooms, and it's about 3 minutes long, and it shows from their side what it is that you see. And you click the breakout rooms button in your toolbar, and only hosts can launch breakout rooms. Co-hosts cannot. So the host launches a breakout room, and this is interesting because if you have an admin host and you want them to launch breakout rooms, they have to be the host while you are the co-host. Permissions. So after you launch a breakout room, you're given a panel with everyone's name in it, and it says, do you want to put, you know, how many breakout rooms do you want to have? And you could say 8, 6, however many, and it'll estimate you're going to have 3 to 4 per room, 5 to 6 per room. And as you change the number, it'll change the number of people in each room. And then you say, yes, 8 rooms. I think for this one today, I did 10. So it was 3 to 4 per room. And then it gave me a list of everyone's name that I could drag and drop if I wanted to before clicking the button to launch breakout rooms. So the host you can either pre-assign breakout rooms by uploading a CSV to Zoom, or you can have it random and then take a moment to move people around the way you want and then launch the rooms.
Great.
So Ingrid asks, can participants record the meeting or only the admin or leader? Or do I need your permission? If you're going to record to your local drive, I believe anybody can do it. Does everybody see the option in your Zoom toolbar to record? Yeah? Yeah. So everybody can record if you're recording to your local drive. But to record to the cloud, only the person who scheduled the meeting has that ability. And the person who schedules the meeting also has to create the polls and also can upload the CSV for breakout rooms, but co-hosts can't. So this is another reason why the admin host really needs to be the host and the facilitator can be the co-host. It says you have to ask my permission. So that's permission. Somebody go ahead and ask that permission. And then I should be able to grant it. You're welcome, Catherine. No, there's no option to ask. Okay, so that means that I have to toggle that ability in my Zoom settings. The Zoom settings tab, when you go into your Zoom account in the browser and you go to settings, there's a long list of settings there. Breakout rooms aren't enabled by default. So if you want to launch breakout rooms, you have to go into your settings and say, yes, I'd like to enable it. It might be because I'm already recording. You're right, Ashley. So I do want to stay for some questions and some conversation, but I do also want to honor everyone's time. It's the top of the hour. Thank you so much, those of you who attended. If you need to skedaddle, thanks so much for attending. But if you'd like to stay, I'm happy to chat for a little while longer. Yeah, Ashley, you might be right. I think it could be because I'm already recording and I'm recording this to the cloud. And my process is I'm going to download it from Zoom and upload it to YouTube and then share that YouTube video with you. So that way I don't have to pay for storage. Great. Grant says Windows allows you to record anything on your computer via Game Center. And that's true. You can use any type of screencast recording software independent of Zoom to record what you see. Great. I'm happy to see all these great comments. This is awesome. What other questions can I answer for you?
Is there any way to share the, to do a screenshot without everyone's annotations? A screenshot of your slides?
Well, let's see. I do have, I did share the link to slides in chat, and I'll send it around with the replay as well.
Only because I did a screenshot of one of the slides when we were annotating. But it's actually like what's on the screen, isn't it? That's the purpose.
It's whatever you see on the screen.
Yeah, because it had all the other junk on it.
Was there a specific slide that I can go back to real quick?
No, it was just a test to see if others can screenshot things.
Okay, yeah. It's going to have the annotations in there. How do you set up polling? Great question. Polling has to be done through the browser. You go to zoom.us, you log into your account there, and you edit the meeting. When you edit the meeting, you can add polls to a meeting or to a webinar, and you have to add them in advance. Like if I went to my polls toolbar right now and I clicked add a poll, it would launch my browser and say, hey, you need to come into Zoom and edit your meeting to add it. Now, if you have a similar meeting that you do again and again, where you ask a lot of polls, you can save your meeting as a template so that way the polls are saved with that template. And then when you create a new meeting, you use that template and it replicates all your polls. That's the only way you can really move polls between one meeting and another. So if you have detailed polls and there's 10 of them, rather than recreating those manually for another meeting, you can save the meeting as a template and create a new meeting from that template, and that'll work.
I also always have just really generic polls set up, like yes and no, just up my sleeve, just in case something pops up, like just really broad general polls.
That's smart. Yeah, and how do you use those in your meeting, Kirsty?
Sometimes we use them for fun. So we play like an Energizer game. If we're waiting, if like a guest speaker is late or something, we'll play like yes or no, like pineapple on pizza or coriander, and people vote, and it's just yeah. Or if we've got a guest speaker and they want to ask something and it's a simple yes or no, we just launch the poll.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, instant interactivity. I love it. Yeah. Great. Don't worry, Danny. People misspell my name all the time, believe it or not. Yeah, but thank you.
How much, Caelan, of what you've shown us today is available on basic, or that you need to go to the upgraded version of Zoom for?
Yeah, so what the basic version of Zoom does is it gives you, I believe it gives you the full suite of features, but it limits your meetings to 45 minutes. And upgrading allows you to go beyond that 45-minute limit. And it also gives you, storage space where you can store meeting recordings for 30 days in the cloud. I don't think you can do that with the basic account.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, I'm looking through chat here to see if I've missed any questions. If I've missed your question, you can go ahead and type it in or ask it now.
I'm gonna go. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Great seeing you. Have fun out there.
Caelan, just the point of interest, I only found this out once when I first started using Zoom, is that there's actually, and I say it to people, like when they're using the chat, particularly the private chat, that actually also gets stored in the as part of your Zoom cloud or wherever you're saving your Zoom session to. So people should really be aware of those little things in case there's conversations that are a little bit sensitive happening in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. The Zoom chat is stored with your recording. So, you know, if people are, I love the way you put that, Tamaku. If people are sharing sensitive information, that it does get stored there. So even if they think, well, this is a private chat I'm having with this person over here, it's an interesting question to see if the host can see that or not. Tamaku, would you mind sending a private chat to someone else? Just say hello in a private chat so that I can't see it. And it's going to be really interesting for me to go and look in my chat log and see if that shows up, because I know it'll show up in yours. If you record, like if you were hosting the meeting, I mean, so if I sent you a private message, my chat log would show it. But can I see your private message to someone else? That's an interesting question.
I'm pretty sure it has, because I've looked at a couple of them before, and they do that. The script comes up and it'll say in brackets private, so it'll say who's having the conversation and actually the content in there.
Interesting. I never knew that. Thank you for teaching me something today. I appreciate that, Tamaku.
Well, you've taught me probably 100 things, Caelan, so.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you, Anne. She sent you a private chat as well. And she sent it to me privately. So what I'm going to do in the replay is I'm going to include the chat log just the way that it came out, assuming that nobody said anything sensitive in the chat. I'll do a quick scan through, but that way you'll all be able to see. Uh-oh. Dr. Braun says, oops. Do I have that right? Are you Dr. Braun? Is that what MD Braun is for? No?
I'm trying to think of other questions. It was so informative. Do you have a schedule of when the other 3 facilitation sessions you're doing now? You put 1 of 4 was on Saturday, but.
Yeah, and the accessibility session is on Friday, and I'll send out the replay later today, and it'll have dates and times for all the upcoming sessions. I'm also teaching a masterclass in August called 10 Fun Games to Play on Zoom. And it's all in gallery view, no slides. So it's just interaction. And we spend 4 minutes on each exercise, and I demonstrate it, and we go through those exercises together so that way you can learn how to host these exercises yourself. And because fun games, they make the meeting so much more enjoyable. Yeah. So Andrew asks, any advantages of Zoom compared to Skype, which also have conference ability? Skype bungled their 10-year lead in the video conferencing space. I remember in 2013, it was the only player in video conferencing, and everybody was using it. And then Google Hangouts came around as a competitor. But Zoom really, they focused on a different niche. The big advantage of Zoom, Andrew, is that I can invite people who I don't know. I can set up a registration page and have the public come and join my meeting. I can also share a Zoom link that says, hey, here's my link to the meeting. Come join me here. And I can hold that behind a subscription wall so that people have to subscribe and register for the meeting. Zoom provides some basic registration reminders. You know, here it's in 1 day, it's in 1 hour, here's the link. They also provide calendar invites. Those, in my view, those are indispensable advantages over Skype. All Skype does is it lets me talk to other people who I've already connected with. That's it. If I was going to invite all these people today through Skype, I would have had to invite them individually. And Dr. Braun comes up, I'm going to keep calling you that because I love that name. Dr. Braun says, what about Microsoft Teams? And I do a lot of work with organizations that straddle this Teams Zoom divide. And the general advantage is to have Teams for internal and Zoom for external. Teams will let you do gallery view up to 9 people. So you can only have a grid of that large. But it also incorporates a lot of secure chat. You could do one-off or group chat, and it's secure in Teams, so the public can't see it. It does some integrations with OneDrive that personally drive me up the wall with their permissions errors, and you gotta always verify that you're allowed to see this file. But they do have a lot of integrations that work for enterprise level communication. But Zoom is forward facing. You can work with complete strangers and have them come and meet you. Teams does have rooms. It's a new feature that they've just launched recently, but they do have video chat rooms. It's pretty much the same as when you're doing a group chat. You just hit the camera, and it's much more like Skype in that way, doing a video call with a group, than it is like Zoom. Zoom is much more in the GoToMeeting kind of space where you're bringing new people in to meet you, whereas Teams are the cohesive groups that you've already worked with before.
I've got another question. Caelan, is there any way that we can actually move the video tiles? And the reason why I say that is when I look at on my screen, you're to the left of me, and so my eyes are always going left. And I'd like you to be right in the middle, so I don't always have to move I know it's something silly, but and I notice you always look into the camera, and so for your engagement and I guess that's something you've become accustomed to and trained yourself into in terms of engagement, because I do find that difficult, is that looking into the camera so that your eyes are always focused straight into your audience.
Right. Yeah, it makes a difference, because if I'm looking elsewhere on the grid, then you're not going to feel that I'm really talking to you. But if I look right into the camera, it is something I've trained myself to do, Tamaku, but I do have a trick that I'd like to share with you. You can resize and move your Zoom window so the person you want to look at is right beneath your camera. Yeah. Yeah. You can't change the order of the grid. Zoom gives the order of the grid, and it's random and it's different for everybody. So the person to my right is not the same as the person to your right. And there's some neat games we can do with grid layout relating to that. But if you resize and move your Zoom window and you put the person you're looking at right beneath the camera, then you can look at the camera, you can look right below to look at the person you're looking at, and then look up again at the camera. And it's a very modest difference. It's so subtle, most people don't even notice. Security concerns. Yeah. So this is a great question, Andrew. And the security has become a big issue for Zoom right after quarantine hit, because Zoom became the communication channel of choice for a lot of large organizations, a lot of schools, and a lot of churches. And those organizations were getting Zoom bombed. Now, if you haven't heard of a Zoom bomb before, it's where somebody uninvited shows up and they do digital graffiti, they share their screen and with awful videos, it's horrid. I've never seen one myself. My meetings have never had a Zoom bombing. And I often share with people a public link to get into my Zoom room. And so I have seen myself as fairly lax in security, and I never saw one of these. And so I went out to my network and I said, hey, what's happening with Zoom bombing? Has anyone actually seen it? And it's rare, but it does happen. And it tends to happen with large groups that are poorly administrated. And so Zoom decided to increase their security a lot. Their recent meetings have to have a password, for instance. But they've given an ability so that you can put that password embedded in the URL. So it's functionally still the same to say, here, click this link, join my Zoom room. But there is an extra layer of security there. There's also some additional bouncer type options where the host can eject people, can mute people. And so there are some other security elements in there. But from my friends in the security space, I've been hearing these same concerns, Andrew, that Zoom is still not as secure as it should be for as universal as it is. And your next question, can more than one person use the same invite? Yes. the way that I have my registration set up is that I actually go through my website to collect registrations, and I use Gravity forms because I can make the page look pretty, and Zoom's default registration pages are ugly. And as a web designer, they offend me. So I typically use an integration to go from Gravity forms and pass the information over to my email newsletter. But I don't actually tell Zoom. I don't use the Zoom registration fields anymore. And so what you're referring to is using a Zoom registration page. You sign up and you say, yes, I'm going to be there. And it sends you a link that it says, this link is unique to you. If other people use that link, it will say that you attended again. That's the only flaw. Is it messes up the attendance numbers in Zoom. Because if I share my attendance link with someone else and I don't attend, Zoom will still say that I've attended. That's the only reason that warning is there. It's not actually, it doesn't have a functional disability if 3 people join the meeting with the same unique meeting link. Great question though. Aha, Rooms functionality is being introduced in June and July, says Anne. So I must have been working with somebody who already had it introduced. But yeah, they do those sorts of feature rollouts where not everybody gets it at once. So yes, Andrew, definitely 2 people could be in the meeting from the same link. Everyone in this meeting is from the same link. I used just one link for everyone. So Zoom won't be able to tell me who attended, which is fine for me. I don't really monitor that myself. But for people who do want to keep attendance, Zoom can do it, but only if you have people register through the Zoom page. If you really wanted to monitor attendance, what I would recommend is having your admin host take a look at the participants panel 10 minutes after the meeting starts and use a free tool like myattendancetracker.com to just mark who's there. You bet. You're welcome. So I have a question for people who are left. What's been great at Tech Week so far? Has anybody seen a presentation that you really enjoyed? What did I miss? Anybody? Thank you, Dr. Braun. Good meeting you.
Well, I watched one yesterday and I can't remember what it was called, but it was about Māori in the AI space.
Yeah, how was that?
It was excellent. It was really good. So they had some key people who are actually working in that space at the moment, Māori people, and the projects that they were doing and where they would like to see things going. So I found that really interesting.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, AI's got a lot of interesting capabilities, and I'm glad to see that there's now a Māori sector of it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's certainly scope, and I know from a few other organisations that I'm with that we're certainly heading in that direction around data sovereignty, and how we can integrate those into our organisation. So yeah, it was really interesting. I enjoyed it, but there's so much. It's just like a buffet of all these awesome things.
Yeah, there's so much on right now. Having problems keeping up with it all. Yeah, but that's what I love about Tech Week. It's such a detailed conversation. You know, there's so much going on. Yeah.
This morning I tuned into a breakfast with some women in technology, and that was really interesting to find out their journey and where they've got to. And they're young, they're still young, they're mid-30s. So they've still got a long way to go, but that was, I thought that was interesting.
Nice.
And videos on social media, creating videos and what to think about for social media.
Nice.
That was yesterday.
Oh, great. Yeah, I missed that one. I had a client meeting, but I really wanted to go because social media is, video is exploding at such an exponential rate. I do a lot of work with independent entrepreneurs who are looking to expand their brand. And the ones who just shoot right out of the gate are the ones that embrace video. Well, any other questions I can answer for you about Zoom?
No, I'm good.
I'm good. Thank you for your time. It's always actually nice to have some one-to-one time afterwards to hear the other questions that don't come up during the session.
Yeah.
So thanks for staying on.
You bet. Yeah, it was really great spending some time with you. Thanks so much for devoting a portion of your morning to learning about Zoom with me, and enjoy the rest of the Tech Week.
You too. Thank you.
Have fun out there. Bye.